Hey, what's up guys, Just Boosters here and welcome back to another One Piece video. So with OP12 about to drop, I guess, or at least becoming tournament legal next week, perfect opportunity to do one of the most popular type of videos in the card game scene, right? Which is like a tier list for the upcoming format, post ban list in this case, because we also had the ban list drop this week and it's going to be tournament legal next week as well. Didn't immediately drop a video like this because I really wanted to play the format like a little bit, see how some decks operated, and I really don't feel like you can make a like an accurate tier list, I suppose, without any testing, right? So doing one today, going to go over basically every leader that has been released, but as you can see, I already have a tier made here, not worth talking about. That's exactly that. These leaders are not really worth talking about. They are not even like tier 1, 2, 3, or even like local warrior tier. Feel free to prove me wrong about these decks in the comments down below, but I don't really think they will be that that viable. But I do have to admit, I of course didn't like test every one of these decks. So yeah, just really quick before we get into it. For me, tier 1 is going to be any deck that can like consistently win a regional type event. Then tier 2 is going to be any deck that can reasonably top any regional type event. And then tier 3 are decks that, if piloted by like a really competent player, or just getting like super lucky with the matchups, I suppose, are gonna get like one top here or there at the regional level as well. And then local warrior decks are decks that honestly just can't compete at the regional level. And they're just, like the title says, right, they are just local warrior decks. But those can be super fun as well, don't get me wrong, but you know, it's gonna be a competitive tier list. Yep, let's just hop right into it, starting off with Archie's Odin. And honestly, at first I was like, maybe I should just put this in not worth talking about, but I low-key think this deck's actually, it's not that bad. It has some cool stuff going for it. It can go like really aggro. It has gotten some pretty good new support cards, like the Yamato, the Red Rush one. That being said, I feel like it's probably still a local warrior deck, even though, you know, becoming a 6-eye leader is never bad, and just the leader ability is pretty strong, but I don't really see it getting any regional tops this season. Even though I suppose, like, if you're really high roll with this deck, I'm just gonna put like a tier 3 deck. Like, I doubt it's gonna happen because it's like that unpopular, but I really think if like a really competent player really committed to playing this deck the entire season, you could probably get a top with this, like top 32 or something. Yeah. Then we immediately go to what probably will be one of the top decks in the upcoming set, which is going to be Green Purple Luffy. Of course, has been a meta mainstay since its release. And with good reason. It's super consistent, very powerful. And to my surprise, it didn't get hit on the ban list at all, which kind of cemented it as one of the top decks in my opinion. And I do expect to see a lot of this deck. Like, it's going to be topping tournaments for sure, winning them as well. I think it's just a very appealing deck in the sense that it's very consistent, and the power level is also reasonably high. Has a lot of options. Yeah, I just think last season it kind of underperformed. I think it could have done better, but I really think that this season is going to be very strong. Then we have Red Zoro. This deck has been doing okay in the past couple of weeks/months. I do think it's like a pretty decent tier 2 deck. Just you know, the aggro strategy is pretty good. It did get hit in the sense that two of its really good matchups, which were really good, like slightly favorable matchups, were like Bello Betty and Blue Purple Luffy. I expect we will be seeing a lot less of those, which then inherently also means that Zoro just becomes less good. However, all the black removal decks in the format, I'm not sure how it's going to shape up. Like, there is a world where Zoro will be very good because those decks are just not gonna get more popular than they were before, but I can also see a world where we actually see a deck like Lucci become more popular again, and that will inherently mean that Zoro becomes less good, right? But I do think for now it's like a tier 2 deck. Then LOL, I think this is like basically what a tier 3 deck is. I think this deck is not bad. I mean, it's still very versatile. It does very, very cool things. It's also pretty consistent. Again, it's a little bit like, I do think it's better than Odin. I can see this deck getting like a regional top if the LoL player gets like moderately lucky or is like very, very competent at playing the deck. But I don't think it's quite like a tier 1 or tier 2 deck. Then we have Doflamingo. This deck has just kind of disappeared off the radar altogether after the period where it was just bar none the best deck, I want to say. I really think in the Lucci, Black Yellow Luffy, Dofi format, Dofi was the top dog. But it kind of just disappeared after the Jinbei ban, and we didn't really see it come back again. Actually, it's not entirely true. We did see like a little bit of success after that as well, but we just saw it kind of disappear with the release of OP11. I should put it like that. And I do expect it's going to be a little bit of the same, but I do think this deck's actually also like a decent tier 3 deck. Like, if someone tops like an event with Doflamingo, I wouldn't be super surprised. I think it would be cool. But I do think it's like a little bit above the local warrior deck, even though I might be giving it too much credit. But it's just one of those decks that I think is really good, but like a lot of the really competitive players, they just favor like other higher power level decks over Doflamingo, which is very reasonable, of course. But I do think that if someone really put their mind to it, this could be like a tier 3 deck. Then we have Whitebeard. So I think unless you're like JCM, this is just a local warrior deck. Yeah, not much to talk about. This deck, this leader has just been power crept a lot. Even though you can still play like a very cool aggro deck with like a lot of cards. I don't really see this deck performing at all. And we have Smoker. This is also just a local warrior deck in my opinion. Literally every video, every tier list I make, I have to say this, that it pains me every time. But this deck is just not, it's just not it. Black removal was in a bad spot. Anyway, sorta. I think it might become a little bit better with the hit of the Snake Man. Because Black Removal does have some solid matchups going to some other top decks, like the only deck we have for now in tier 1, which is Green Purple Luffy. It actually is not that good into removal decks like Lucci. But I think Smoker is just like a way worse Lucci in what it does. If we're like in a format where we only go really tall, then maybe Smoker would be like a better option than Lucci, but we're just not, so yeah. Then we have this Ace deck. Just wanted to put this here because I think it's like a little bit better than the other decks I put in. Not even worth talking about, but it belongs like nicely next to Whitebeard. Don't want to go into too much depth about that. And then Nami, she's banned. She's banned. I know a lot of people are like it's the divisive subject to say the least, but I'm very happy this leader got banned. Yes, it is a very skillful deck to play, but I just really don't like alt-win. I don't like having to play like a different game when my opponent flips this leader than against every other leader. And it's like, oh, you should just prepare for it, yada yada. I don't want to. This deck is banned. I think it's perfect like that. Then with Katakuri, and I think we're going to experience like a little bit of yellow renaissance. But I do not think Katakuri is going to be one of the leaders really benefiting from that. Probably out of the generic mono yellow leaders, Katakuri is probably the worst, which is kind of crazy because he has access to Big Mom, which is arguably the best yellow generic, or it's not generic, like the best yellow 10 drop in the game. But at this point we have so many good 10 drops that decks like Yellow Kid or Enel can just benefit from it more. And then of course Yellow is getting the Kuma in this set, which I think is pretty much like a custom card, like being able to heal and then also having a counter as well, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I think this is like a local warrior deck, and if you are like a big fan of playing yellow, then you probably have a better leader in either Enel or Yellow Kit. Then Rebecca, it's probably like the best of the local warrior decks, I suppose. Once again, I do think we're maybe in for... Maybe it could go over here, because I do think that black removal will be better this format than it was in the last format. But again, Rebecca's just one of those leaders that can't attack, which is a major detriment to any leader, pretty much, which I think will land her a spot, like, at most at the top of tier 3, but could very well be a local warrior deck as well. But I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt and put her here, but we'll have to see. Then moving on, we have Queen. Once again, this is just one of those decks that I think is like a little bit above these decks, but I don't really see this performing at all either. Even though it also got like a little bit of support, I guess, in the form of Kuma. I assume that's a card you could play in Queen. You have Purple Yellow Crocodile. Honestly, I just literally put this here because I really like I like this deck. I think it's very fun, but it's also a local warrior deck at most. We have this Sabo deck, which saw like a little bit of popularity. I think it's already months ago, where people were playing it with the animal package, but this deck's also just kind of tied to the existence of black removal in the format, and if like black removal is popular, then this deck is like pretty decent, but we'll have to see. And honestly, even if like Lucci somehow becomes like the most popular deck, I don't really see this deck putting up any crazy numbers, so I do think it slots nicely over, like, I don't know, the tier should probably look something like this. Bello Betty. So this was pretty much like the queen of the last format, but I've been talking about this a lot with my friends, where we basically had Bello Betty exist in the same capacity that it did in the OP11 format, like formats prior to that, but the deck never put up any numbers, and the reason for that is that it basically got carried by the fact that its good matchups were very, very popular decks in the previous format, and I really think that's what this deck kind of is leaning on to heavily. And with the upcoming format, it's not going to be like that. We get the introduction of Green Zoro, most notably, which I think will be a tier 1 deck. And that deck just totally obliterates the Bello Betty deck. The same goes for Rayleigh. I mean, this deck just really struggles with the fact that there's going to be a lot of 5-life leaders as the top decks in the upcoming format, and Bello Betty just struggles a lot more against 5-life leaders than 4-life leaders. With that being said, I do think that it could still be like... Yeah, honestly, the Green Zoro matchup is so bad that it could honestly just be like a top tier 3 deck, which is kind of crazy considering it was like maybe the 3rd best deck in the previous format, but unlucky Bello Betty enthusiasts, I suppose. And Rosinante, I do think this is like a local warrior deck. It has some cool tools, it does some cool stuff. I know one of them went X2 at the Manchester Regional, A2, which is a very solid score for a deck like this, but I don't really see it. But it still didn't top that regional, and I don't really see that changing. Sakazuki, so we finally have something really interesting to talk about. So this leader came back. It was, of course, like the very, very best deck in the OP5, OP6 formats. Like, if you look at pie charts from back then, it sometimes took like, I don't know, 75% of the top 8 spots, just because the power level was so high and it was so consistent. But I really think we won't be seeing this deck perform like that again. I think this is like an upper tier 2 deck. But the power creep, you know, in the last 6 sets has just been, it has been pretty big. I even think there is like a case to be made that Lucci will actually be better than Sakazuki in this form, even if Sakazuki has like the added consistency of the leader ability, right? Yeah, this deck is getting very, very high, but if you saw like the sim stats as well, it has like a win rate of 41% right now, which is very, very low. Of course, there is like a learning curve to this leader, so I do expect that win percentage to move up in the coming weeks, but I do not see this being like a tier 1 deck. Maybe someone can create like a totally insane build with this that I didn't predict, and then it could crack the tier 1. Like, it does have a good matchup into Green Purple Luffy, for example, right? But for now, I think it will be upper tier 2. We will see this deck top some regionals, but I don't think it's going to be one of like the top dogs of the format. Then we have Enel, which I also think will be like a solid tier 2 deck. It's just getting like some good support, right? It gets the Kuma most notably, which is very, very strong, which means this deck is going to be playing like 16 heal cards or something ridiculous like that. And it just does very well into a deck like Rayleigh, which is going to be one of the top decks, which just means that Enel will be like a pretty decent pick as well, because if you roll into like a lot of your good matchups, you are going to do well. But again, I just don't think Enel is capable as a leader to be like a tier 1 deck, because it's kind of a skill check leader for your opponent as well. Very often, if your opponent is playing a deck that's like a decent matchup into it and knows how to play the matchup, then that's very, very unfavorable for you. So I do think it's going to be like a tier 2 deck. It's going to be topping regionals, but not really winning them, I don't think. Purple Luffy, I could see this deck doing relatively well. It's also one of the winners, I think, for the ban list. Gum Gum Giant didn't get hit, and this deck still gets to play Katakuri, right, which is very, very powerful. So I also expect this deck to be somewhere over here. We really saw this deck not in action that much in the previous formats, but maybe we will see pick up some steam. Then Perona, just a local warrior deck. It's probably like over here or something. Yamato, I think it's a little bit hard to judge. I think it's probably a tier 3 deck. I'm just not like I don't think this deck is very good, especially now going into this format that I mentioned earlier already, where a lot of the best leaders are going to be 5 live leaders. That's just not how do you say it, an environment where Yamato is set to thrive. So, but I do think it's good enough to top a regional, right, which is why I'm putting her in tier 3. Reiju, I think this is also like a tier 3 deck. It just fits the description that I gave to it earlier perfectly. This deck is just, yes, it is capable to top a regional if you get lucky enough with it, but I don't really see it performing better than that. Moria, so when PRB drops, maybe this deck's actually going to be semi-playable, but for now it's going to be, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt and say it's like a tier 3 deck, but could very well be a local warrior deck as well. I'm just like a little bit biased because I do really like this deck, and I do very much intend to play this deck when PRB drops, but we have to wait for that. But again, like Black Removal maybe will have a spot in the format, and if Black Removal has a spot in the format, then Moria does as well, but we have to wait and see. Dragon, local warrior, I suppose. Then we have Bonnie, and this deck is getting a lot of hype. Like, I've been seeing some tier list people putting up where they see this as a tier 1 deck. I am not so sure, honestly. This deck, again, it loses to something like Sakazuki, which I do expect to be pretty popular. It loses to Lucci, which I also expect to be more popular than it was last format. It is a pretty solid deck, though, and it has like a good matchup into a lot of the non-removal decks. But for now, I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and put it like at the bottom of tier 1, but it could also be like a top tier 2 deck. We'll kind of have to wait and see. People are very hyped about this deck. I'm not so sure. It did get support, of course. It got like the new Bonnie, which is a very, very powerful card. It got Mihawk. That card is absolutely insane. So I do get why people are excited about this deck. Will it be one of the best decks in the format? I'm not so sure, but we'll see. Boa, this is just like, I don't know, put it over there. Foxy, I think, is also just like a little bit above, not worth talking about, but I don't really think it's like a good deck or anything. Lucci, so this deck is interesting. I'm gonna put it here, but no bias, guys. I swear, no bias. This could very well be one of the best decks going into the format. It's mostly Teach and Buggy that were really holding this deck back, and I think Snake Man as well. The matchup into Snake Man really wasn't that good, but with Snake Man just naturally becoming less popular and Buggy just getting insanely gatekept by Zoro, which is basically like an auto-lose matchup, I do expect Lucci to be more playable. Again, I'm definitely going to be trying it, and it might very well be one of the tier 1 decks that we're going to be looking at. No bias, I swear, guys. Then we have Vegapunk. This is like a tier 3. Pretty decent tier 3 deck, I think. Chopper, yeah, Local Warrior, Marco. So I think this deck is like a little bit underrated, to be honest. Like it was like a little bit underrated in the past formats. Is it tier 2 or is it like upper tier 3? I'm not sure. Maybe. Actually, no, I'm going to put my favorite mark. I'm just going to say it's like an upper tier 2 deck. Once again, removal is going to be good. What deck is a good removal deck? It's Marco. It might struggle a little bit into Rayleigh and Zoro, though. I'm not sure. Like, I didn't test the matchup or anything. But I do actually think... I actually think it might be a pretty good pick going into the next format. So if you're like a Marco enthusiast, then maybe it's a good time to... pick up the deck or keep playing the deck, because it has put up good results in the past format as well, right? Alright, then we have Carrot. Yeah, this is just like a tier 3 deck as well. I think it's probably like Chopper tier. Pudding, same. Goes somewhere, I don't know, here. Kogara. This deck actually got new support. Like it got a new vanilla, which is actually kind of good support for Kogara randomly. And then it also got the... Is it a 5-cost Kogara that says like if your opponent takes life, you can draw a card. And Kogara was already very good at farming like 1 billion cards to their hand, and that new one is only going to improve that, obviously. I honestly think this deck is pretty underrated. I think it's a pretty good deck, and I do think it will be a tier 2 deck coming to the format. Especially at the start of the format, you will see that aggro decks are usually very, very strong. Because the format hasn't really been solved yet, and aggro is just a very... straightforward tool to navigate an unsolved format. So I do really think that if you want to get like a regional top of Kogara, bring it to like the first regional you're playing, and you might very well do okay. Against also getting the Kuma, that card is just absolutely ridiculous. Shanks, so we have Shanks here. This deck has also been getting like a little bit of hype. Honestly, I always thought this deck was bad, even when this was considered to be the best deck by a lot of people. I didn't think this deck was very good, and my opinion on the Shanks deck hasn't really changed that much, so I'm just gonna put it exactly there. Because it does have like some removal tools, and the leader ability is just generically very strong. Again, 5-life leader, also very powerful, but... I mean, I honestly think all the decks above it are better than Shanks, but I'm just like a certified Shanks hater, I guess. Lim, this deck was very, very strong in the OP10 format, and I do see it being like playable at least as like a tier 3 deck, obviously, going to the next format. Buggy. So you could argue that Buggy was like a tier 1 deck in the previous format, or, you know, upper tier 2 at least. That's where I would have put it myself. I'm going to be putting it like as a bottom tier 2 deck for now. And the reason for that is I expect green purple to be very popular. Horrible matchup for Buggy. Bunny is going to be popular. Horrible matchup for Buggy. And then green Zoro, I predict to be the most popular deck going into the next format, and that's like even worse of a matchup than green purple and Bonnie are. So Buggy just can't be a tier 1 deck with those matchup spreads, right? We have this Luffy deck. I do think this is like a tier 3 deck as well. Not much to say about that. Roman can go into Local Warrior. Teach. Honestly, I think this deck is going to be pretty good still. Like, we are getting Rayleigh, which is not the best matchup, but if you just start like leader effective from the first turn onwards, it's not that bad. Like you can very well grab control of the game, especially if they don't see their rush pieces. And then the Zoro matchup is also, I wouldn't say it's favorable, but it's like, at least with the Black Vortex, I don't think it's that bad. It's like 45, 55, 50-50 maybe even. The green-purple matchup, of course, remains like a little bit bad, but I do think playing the Black Vortex improves that matchup as well because of the interaction going into the Rush Luffy, which is like the biggest problem when you're playing against that deck. That being said, with those matchups, I don't think you can comfortably put Teach as a tier 1 contender, but I do think it's, out of all these decks, I would probably feel the best taking Teach to a regional, or maybe Sakazuki, I suppose. I'm not sure, but like I think these 3 decks are like interchangeable in how good they will be probably. Smoker! So we're getting back-to-back decks that I really like to talk about. This deck is getting slept on, guys. You heard it here first. I'm seeing people put this in like tier 3. I think that's absolutely insane. We're getting like the Perona and the Mihawk. The insane support for this deck, and this deck was already very, very good. So yeah, to me it's just going to be an upper tier 2 deck. It's also getting the what's it called? Demon Sword Style Ashura, Blades Drawn, Deadman's Game. That card's amazing for this deck as well. Yeah, just aggro, beat your opponent's face in, and then you also have like some pretty reasonable defensive options playing the Paradise Waterfall and Mihawk. To me, it could very well be a tier 1 deck. Honestly, like other people putting it so low got me kind of insecure about it, but I would honestly feel pretty confident putting it over there, but I might just be overhyping it. Update to the guide, dropping this week, by the way. So, you know, check out the link in the description if you didn't get it yet but are interested in it. Then we have Green Yellow Law. So this will probably still be I think this was like a super solid tier 2 deck in the previous format, and I don't really see it changing that much, even though the Zoro matchup I suppose is also pretty rough. As Rayleigh as well. So it did get some new matchups that are not necessarily very good for it. But Usopp, Local Warrior, I hate this deck. Yellow Kid is going to be right next to Enel. I think honestly it might be the better of the 5 life mono yellow decks. If you are interested in playing that. I just think this deck is very, very strong, very, very underrated as well. The Kuma has very, very good support for it. I think this deck really underperformed in the last format, really. You really saw that when people that were very good at playing this deck, they really did perform well with this deck as well, making regional top cuts multiple times. So, yeah, Kobe, upper tier 3, I suppose. I do still think this deck is pretty decent. It should also have like a pretty decent matchup going into Rayleigh, but Zoro not so much. Shirahoshi, same. Snake Man, this one is also pretty interesting. I do expect this deck to still be pretty viable and to slot in like in this slot. I don't think it will be tier 1 just because it's like with the hits on Katakuri and Big Mom. You know, when you play them in this deck, or I should say you can't play them in this deck anymore, it does significantly decrease your survival rate against the more aggro-ish decks, which I think is very, very good. But I do still think the deck will be very playable. This Nami deck is also just a tier 3 deck in my opinion. Katakuri is a local warrior deck. Actually, Nami might also very well be a local warrior deck. Rayleigh, so yeah, I just think this is obviously going to be like a tier 1 contender. 5 life leader that's super consistent, plays a very, very aggro-ish strategy. So again, I do think this deck will excel mostly in the start of the format, but we really see in the East that the deck performed all through OP12. I mean, very decent power level, super consistent, 5 life leader. What else do you want, right? It's also just like a pretty decent matchup into mostly all of these tier 2 decks. I think it's also like very good into green-purple. I think it might struggle a little bit against Bonnie. It's going to be very strong against Smoker. Like, this deck being one of the top decks is one of the biggest reasons I think Smoker might be a tier 2 deck. Lucci eats this for breakfast, of course, but I mean, that's just how it is. Then we get to Zoro, and this is just... I think this will be... it's gonna be very similar to Shanks. It's also, I think, playstyle-wise, kind of like Green Shanks. This deck is going to be extremely popular. I mean, it features one of the most popular characters in the show, and then the deck's also very, very strong. And I do think it's also very affordable. So I do think it's going to have the biggest play rate, and then the deck's also like reasonably powerful, reasonably consistent. So I do think this is going to be like the deck to beat. Definitely at the start of the format, and then after that I'm not so sure, but we'll see. You have Kuzan. I'm a huge fan of this deck, and I do think this is going to be like, maybe it's going to be a tier 1 deck, and if not, it's going to be like upper tier 2, but I'm just gonna hype it up a little bit and put it as like a tier 1 deck. I'm gonna be dropping a guide on this as well in the coming weeks. This deck just has everything in my opinion. I think the matchup spread for this deck is like into pretty much everything. It's like 50-50, save for like something like Teach. And even against Teach, you can play like some tech cards to improve the matchup. It's like probably the most consistent deck in the game. You get to draw and cycle so much when you're playing this leader. The power level is pretty good. I mean, going like dropping in 2 turns like 4 8k beaters. Pretty powerful. Yeah, I think we'll see a lot more of this deck than we saw in the East, just by the sheer virtue that in the East, this deck's worst matchup was like the most popular and the best deck, and it got hit pretty hard in our format, which really leaves some room for Kuzan to hopefully shine. So I'm very excited about that. This is probably going to be the deck I'm going to be bringing to my first regional next month. Probably, I'm not completely sure yet, but I think so. Then, okay, we're finally getting to the end of the list. We have this Sanji deck. I honestly think this deck's kind of good, so I'm going to put it like bottom tier 2. It's a very interesting deck, plays very different from like a lot of the regular leaders. However, it's still like a 4-life leader, so it struggles with more aggro strategies as well. And then, honestly, what sets this back the most, I think, like in a vacuum, this deck is pretty good, but it has a bad matchup in the Green Zoro. It has a bad matchup into Bonnie. I think the matchup into Rayleigh is not very good. The matchup into Kuzan is like 50-50. And then the matchups into these are like pretty decent. It absolutely annihilates Teach. Like, Teach just can't beat this deck. Loses hard to Buggy. It just has like a bad matchup into 3 of the 4 decks that I think will be the top dogs, and by virtue of that, the deck just can't be that viable, right? Which is unlucky, because I do think like in a different meta, the deck could have been very, very powerful. Rosinante, honestly, guys, I'm not gonna lie, I have no clue. I literally don't know. Then Koala, this leader got super hyped at when it was announced, but then it just kind of didn't live up to the expectation. I think it's also one of those decks that's kind of depends on how the format is for it to be good, and the format, how it's going to be shaping up, it's just not good for Koala, right? Like, it's also one of those decks that like it's not good into Zoro, it's not good into Green Purple. I think it's okay into Bonnie probably. Then it's not good into Rayleigh. I don't even think it's good into Kuzan. It's not good into Smoker. I guess it's pretty good into Lucci, because all of the characters are just inherently 8 cost. But it's not good into Teach. I mean, you know where I'm going, right? Like, yeah, the leader ability reads kind of crazy, and the card pool, like with the dragon being released, it also seems strong, but it's just the matchups for it to be good aren't quite there. But just by virtue of the leader inherently being very good, I'm going to be putting it in tier 2. I do assume we'll see like some minor success from this leader, but it might even be a tier 3 deck, to be honest. Oh, I forgot to put this leader in not worth talking about. This Sanji deck, Local Warrior. Kids, I kept this around because I just always think that this leader ability is just kind of strong, right? I always feel like maybe there's something we can do with this Kid Lear, but I don't know, this card is banned. This card is just blue-purple, but worse. Still not super bad though, so I'll put it in tier 3. Kid, local warrior, Uta, local warrior. And then this is like the last of the really interesting decks I want to talk about, which is Sanji Zoro. This won like a big Asia tournament or got second. I don't remember, it won or got second. And it actually also won like a 50-person like PlayStation 5 tournament we had in the Netherlands this past weekend. I really think this deck it's kind of good, right? And it's like a little bit similar to Golgara, like especially at the start of the format, like a very aggro deck like this can be very successful. And then this deck has the added benefit that almost nobody has any clue what this deck looks like, right? And if your opponent just doesn't know what to play around, that just inherently boosts how successful the deck is going to be. I'm actually going to be putting this. I do think this deck is very strong. I'm going to put it like over here. Definitely going to be like a dark horse deck going to this format. Then we have the Sabo local warrior deck. We have Black Yellow Luffy. I'm gonna be like nice to it, put it like the bottom of tier 3, but just because like a lot of people, they already forgot how to play against this deck. And if you don't know how to play against this leader, then suddenly it becomes like 10 times as good as if you do know how to play against it. And then okay, this I don't know. We didn't get it yet, so who knows. Let me know down in the comments below where you think like Ace and Whitebeard should fit in, because I honestly don't know. Yeah, I think this is going to be the tier list, guys. Let me know down below what you think about it. Do you agree with my takes? Did I have some really shitty takes? It's also very, very possible, of course, but I do feel pretty confident with like the upper echelon of this tier list, and then maybe like some of the decks I put lower could be better. I'm not sure. Yeah. That's gonna be it. Have been rambling for pretty long. My mouth is literally getting dry. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and if you do, I'll see you in the next one.